Welcome to the Meta Perspectives Podcast, a meta radio podcast, a podcast talking about shit. Meta shit. Let's get into it.
Do you believe it's morning? I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind.
Welcome, Niran.
Great to be here.
Could you do a quick intro for people? Your name, what you're working on, and maybe some of the problems you're trying to solve with the projects that you're currently working on right now.
Sure. So my name is Niran Babalola. I currently work on Panvala, which is a project that I founded. What we're trying to do is create a league of communities that work together to basically earn subsidies for the work that they do. Matching funds for their donations, both from the system's token supply, which is the novel part of the system that we built, as well as traditional things like corporate sponsorships. We think all sorts of communities can work together to get these kind of subsidies and amplify the work that they can do. In general, what led me to this particular problem is once I figured out what blockchain technology could do in the first place, it kind of opened up this whole landscape of solutions that we couldn't even have attempted before. And to me, what really clicked for me was finding ways to help communities coordinate to fund the things that they care about together. So ever since I got involved in the Ethereum space back in 2015, that's been the problem that's been consuming my mind, more or less. How can we help people coordinate to fund the things that they care about? So I've been working on different kinds of prototypes for decentralized nonprofits over the years. And eventually I feel like I kind of cracked the problem with Panvala, which I started working on in mid-2018. So now basically what we do is we help match donations currently on Gitcoin grants for communities that want to do that. I won't go into the technical parts of how that works, but basically community members can earn matching funds for the rest of their community. So if there's projects that a specific community cares about, some enterprising individuals from within that community go and they get tokens so they can earn matching funds for their community. And then during the next round of Gitcoin grants, the projects that community cares about are going to be able to earn matching funds from that system. So that's generally the kind of thing we do. We bring communities together so they can work on amplifying the work that they can do.
Got it. Yeah, that's really awesome. It sounds really interesting. I'd be interested, and maybe we can circle back later and talk about like how people actually claim those matching funds and stuff. Because that's an interesting process. But yeah, I think from the community side, it's a great fit for what we talk about here because the technical possibilities are there, right? But the coordination and the like facilitating community action has been a tricky part. So how do you guys approach that? Or personally, like how do you see like blockchain solutions like coming into communities and helping people, but not just from like what's possible with contracts and blockchains, like actually the organization and like empowering of individuals to accomplish things together?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like one of the key questions that people have had about the blockchain space for so long is like, what's the killer app? What actually gets normal people using this rather than having these solutions that supposedly solve a problem but don't have that much usage? So for me, if what we're trying to do is help communities coordinate to like fund the things that they care about within their own community, we have to start with our own community. There are problems that we have within the Ethereum space, within the broader decentralization community, and we don't really organize to solve them well. We're good at maybe creating companies to try to solve a problem, but we're not good at effectively creating civic associations to come together and say, hey, these are things that we care about that maybe the market can't solve on its own, but we are going to solve it ourselves because at the end of the day, this is a society that's run by people. It's our responsibility to solve the problems that face us whenever we see them. It's not somebody else's problem. So we don't have that norm yet in our community where the solution is to organize ourselves to solve a problem. And that's what I think we need to start doing. As long as the Ethereum community isn't the most organized community you've ever seen, then everything that we say about this technology is effectively a lie.
That's interesting. Yeah, perspective.
Yeah, if this technology is very powerful at organizing people, but we're not organized, we're liars. So that's
it's a really bad example, right, of what we're trying to preach to other people. Like, if we can't do it for ourselves, then how are other people supposed to use it to do it for their own communities?
Exactly that. And having an organized Ethereum community doesn't mean that we're all trying to get everybody on the same page to do the same thing. That's not what it looks like. What it looks like is the kind of civic life that used to be, from what I've read, used to be pretty common in America, where there were all sorts of civic associations in the city. It's not that everybody's part of one civic association, it's that they found their people, they brought together their funds, and they built a hospital, or they started a health insurance fund, or they built a school. Like when our governments weren't able to solve those problems, people took it into their own hands, created their own organizations, and solved it themselves. It's not that everybody said, hey, we're all going to agree to do this thing, but the people who did agree said, hey, okay, time to do this thing. Here's my money, here's yours. Let's put it together and get some stuff done. And that's what we need to start doing together.
The ultimate example of like putting your money where your mouth is in these cases.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, what do you think is the factor or one of the factors that allowed these people to be so effective? Like if we're saying early Americans forming communities or building churches or roads or hospitals, it wasn't the technology because they didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think it was that allowed people to effectively pool resources and accomplish things?
So I think there's two things that they had that we don't. One is necessity. For a lot of these problems that they were trying to solve within their own communities, if they didn't come together to solve them, they just would not be solved. If a community needed a hospital and they couldn't come together to build that hospital, there would just be no hospital. So it's like, well, either we're going to succeed or lots of people are going to live miserable lives. So they had that force of necessity that drove them to solve problems. Necessity.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I think they had that we don't is much stronger social ties within communities in general. I'm not a social scientist, but it sure seems to me that the kind of social bonds and active communities that used to once exist don't really exist anymore. So we might have our coworkers in one spot, we have our close group of friends, but there's not these other organizations that it seems like people once participated in. For instance, churches are one easy example. A lot of people don't really do that anymore, but those were once the glue of many local communities in particular. If people aren't used to coming together with people who they have they're not related to in any way, they might not have chosen them to be best friends with, but it's just like, hey, this is my community and we work together to solve the problems that we have together. That's something that we've lost. So I think those are the kinds of things that we need to start to rebuild. And if we're going to start to rebuild them, we have to rebuild them within the conditions that we currently live in. For me personally, when I think about the people that I have the most in common with, it might not be the people down the street. It might be the people that I connect with on the internet almost every day. So instead of thinking about these civic associations as things that start off with people meeting in a coffee shop around a table and starting an organization, we have to change the way we think about it. I think the next wave of civic life starts online. It starts with people who've never met, people who aren't in the same city, but they decide that they have a problem that they want to solve together, and they put their resources together to do that. Even before communities start actually solving problems together, typically, from what I've read, the thing that really brings people together to begin with is just starting organizations to network with one another. Let's build tighter bonds with one another, make friends, and be able to use them for our own purposes, like business networking or just pursuing shared interests together. Not about funding anything that needs to be funded. It's just like, hey, I just want more friends. We're going to create an organization, and that's going to be the purpose of our organization, to make more friends. And some organizations never really proceed past that level, and they just enjoy what they've built together, they keep meeting on a regular basis and they build stronger bonds. From there, some subset of those organizations start to actually build up a budget so they can solve the problems that they have. And I think we need to start with step one, really build more tight-knit groups of friends within our community with like formal organization. And then step two, for some of those who decide that they want to solve problems together, help them build up the processes that they need to build a sustainable budget and go from there.
So it's about building on top of just having like frameworks for shared bank accounts or fund distribution, but actually helping to build processes and like flows for people to go through so that it's more of a easy to navigate system and like something you can like almost deploy as like a system in many different communities that essentially works.
Exactly that. Like I try to think about it as little of the technology first as possible, because really if what we're saying is, hey, we want to form these groups that start to build tighter knit friendships, like what tools do we have to help people do that behind the scenes? But in the front, it's like, hey guys, let's build a club. We're gonna invite people who we think that we'd be good friends with. The tool behind the scenes that I think is very effective is, hey guys, let's deposit some money into a smart contract, and that's going to be our commitment requirement for membership in this club. And I think that's actually extremely powerful. In my own life, with the Meta Cartel, which I'm a member of, back in February, we were organizing a house at ETH Denver for people to stay in together. We ended up with a couple houses. But like, for me, I'm not typically the kind of guy who jumps at that kind of opportunity to like share rooms with strangers when I'm just trying to like at a conference in particular, that's like a high social energy sort of thing. And then I want my, low social energy thing when I'm trying to relax. But when I thought through it, I was like, hey, this is a house being organized by a club that I'm a part of. Everyone in this club has put down 10 Ether as a deposit. So all these people who are going to be in these houses are people who have, A, committed a lot of money to signal that they want to form stronger bonds with the other people in this group. And B, like they have something at stake. They don't want to ruin what they've effectively sacrificed to be a part of. So to me, even though it's this house full of strangers, it's like, well, I can feel comfortable staying in this house full of strangers because I know I can see on chain that these people have made this digital commitment to each other. So I think that's a very powerful tool for building communities that if you use behind the scenes, if you just say, hey guys, we're forming a club to make friends, let's see if you can apply and be part of this. Once you get approved, it's like, here's the tool that we use behind the scenes to make our friendship stronger. Deposit some money in this thing. You can get it out if you need to, but this is the commitment that we ask people to make to be part of this thing. I think it's extremely powerful, and if we can teach more people how to do it, I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I definitely think the skin in the game mechanism has really proven itself with Meta Cartel because you get such a high value of membership. People are very serious about their commitments and their projects, and it's a lot of money to put on the line to join a club, right? Like a networking club. Mm-hmm. And of course, Meta Cartel does so many more things to that and is constantly shooting off in different avenues to explore what's the best path forward. So I think is really interesting. And what it reminds me of is like probably what it used to mean to be like an early American settler. You had this shared bond of like, wherever we are leaving, we're looking for a better life. And we are doing that like majority wise with like integrity and hard work and commitment. And so people who decide to form these communities together, they have a really shared spirit and shared goals. And so it's like a really high level of trust within those communities. And you fast forward to today and you've got a much different situation, a much larger population and a much broader background of motivations, people could have been born here, could have immigrated here, and could love it here, could hate it here, right? But in early America, you wanted to be there because it was hard. It wasn't easy. And that shared hardship actually formed a bond between people, and is probably what led to starting these communities, these towns and cities that pooled their resources and their energies together to get so big or to become so effective. So it's interesting. It's like a digital return to the origins of society setting.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like one comparison that really resonates with me is in 1996, a guy named John Perry Barlow, I believe, he wrote a document called the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace. And this was at a time where the United States government was trying to regulate the internet for, I think, the first time, or either it was an early effort or the first effort to regulate the internet. So what he says in this Declaration of Independence is basically, hey, governments of the world, you have no influence here. Like, this is space of the mind where we're going to connect with all these people around the world using our free speech to do whatever we want in this realm where you have no influence. So, like, that was basically, to me, a real a lodestar for the vision that people had at that time of the internet as this liberating technology that would allow people to come together as they wanted to do so. But as we've seen in the years since, there's been a lot of good has come out of the internet, but we've also seen some of the bad. And one thing that I think we're missing is that if you want people's independent liberties to be used in a effective way, I think you actually need organized people who can build up their own resources to solve their own problems to be able to do that. And in the absence of being able to build up our own resources to solve our own problems, governments and corporations have stepped in to do it on our behalf on the internet, in cyberspace. Mm-hmm. So Facebook, we have Google, we have these other people solving our problems, and then we complain when we don't like the way that they solved it, when they control our data, when they share it with people we don't want to. It kind of sucks. And to me, what we're missing is civic life in cyberspace. We need the ability to be able to build up our own resources, to build up our own infrastructure, to solve the problems that we face. And since we've seen this pattern play out, we don't have to do that much that's new. We just have to repeat the experiences that other people have gone through, building up civic life, building up organizations to be able to solve their problems, and just start to do it online. We didn't used to have the tools to do that online. You couldn't create a digitally native civic association with strangers on the internet. You'd have to create some sort of legal entity in your own real world home and get started from there. But now that you can actually deploy a smart contract and say, hey, these are the people that I want to start to organize with, we can create digital organizations and basically replay the same process of building up civic life from scratch. And when we get to a point where we have this thriving civic life, when Facebook does something we don't like, we don't have to just take it. We can just say, hey, we have our own resources. We're going to build our own, and we're going to go from there.
Well, that's a great segue, because I think, I love that slogan, civic life in cyberspace. It's something I hadn't thought about before, a great positioning for people to think about it. But I think that's a great launch into, like, have you experimented or heard about the implementation of ERC20 tokens on Reddit?
I've heard about that. It seems really cool.
Yeah, it seems like a great experiment, because if you think about it just on a basic level, if your community gets censored or shut down on Reddit, you can essentially take all the token data and just spawn it somewhere else, right? So it's like, yeah, you may lose your chat history and these kind of things, but you could bring it up and everyone still has the same amount of value attributed to whatever account they have, because the accounts are off. They're not controlled by the platform, or they're not controlled by Facebook. You know, you can't be censored from actually what the values of your account are, which are the underlying fabric of like who has what reputation or who controls what inside the community. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting. And there's a lot of cool experiments being done from the guys at Ray Guild and people within Metacartel in general, playing with moons and bricks and stuff like that. So I look forward to seeing more come out of there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very powerful trend. The metaphor that I used to think about it is like once you've bought a board game from the store, like you own the pieces and you can do whatever you want with it. You have these rules that are in the box. You can follow the rules. You can play with house rules. You can do whatever you want. And as long as the game is worth playing, you're going to keep using those pieces for as long as the game is worth playing. When Reddit starts to give their communities the pieces to the game, if those pieces, if the game that they're playing with those pieces are worth playing, that's not clear yet. Like, it's not clear if having these karma points as currency is a game worth playing. But if it is worth playing, once you put the pieces in the hands of the players, they don't need anybody else to play the game anymore. If Reddit decides to shut down that experiment, the users have the pieces. They can keep playing that game as long as they want. They might have to go somewhere else, but nobody can take the pieces from them. And I think that's really powerful.
That's great. It's an awesome metaphor. What does worth playing the game mean to you from your perspective?
So there are games that feel bad when you actually play them. So the easiest example to me is Monopoly. I loved Monopoly as a
Exactly what I was thinking. Monopoly. I hate playing with my little cousins because they always get upset, and they end up crying in the end. And I'm like, well, you didn't buy the right properties.
Yeah, it's an antisocial game. Like, I love it, but I get why people hate it. So to me, that's like one example of a game that a lot of people feel isn't worth playing, even though it's it's a very popular game somehow. But in the real world, there's also games that we find aren't worth playing. There's lots of complaints that people have with the way our society runs. And if you look at our set of laws as rules to a board game and the pieces as property, land, equity, etc., there's some parts of that game that people don't feel is worth playing. So when I talk about these new games that we're playing, whether it's just karma points on Reddit or whatever, if people start playing the game and they feel like it's changing the way they behave in a way that they don't like, they might stop playing it. For instance, another example of a game that some people don't like is academia. When people think about academia growing up, they're like, oh, I'm going to be this researcher. I'm going to discover all this new knowledge, and that's what I'm going to spend my time doing. But one of the very common complaints about academia is that the actual game that you play is publish or perish. Like you're trying to get something to a journal somewhere because your whole career depends on what gets into these journals. Like, it's not about the raw value of the knowledge that you're pursuing. It's about the game that the system actually runs on. So we have to kind of think about those as separate things. Like a lot of people see the idea of giving people these currencies on Reddit as obviously a good thing, but depending on how it influences what goes on in the community, it could kind of mess up the vibe the same way that some people feel like the pressure to publish in academia messes up the vibe.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example. It makes a lot of sense. It's probably so difficult to try and publish the right information, as well as like making it, factually correct, and then not conflicting with too many theories in the past where people are crying out against your research. It reminds me of an author who I've read quite a lot of, Graham Hancock, and he talks a lot about kind of the old mentality of archaeologists and historians and people who have come before them, setting the foundations for like what is true about Egypt or what is true about ancient Japan or the Sumerians, and how much of it is basically old research that has never been questioned or updated, and that people are building new theories on top of without ever going back and saying, actually, these timelines, these dates don't line up. And so building a foundation on top of, or building structures and like assumptions on top of foundations that might essentially be false from the very beginning. Because it's more about people and more about their reputation and less about finding the truth of the situation.
Yeah, and I think that insight is part of where I'm very in line with what's happening with Metagame. And to me, Metagame is this idea that if we can basically build kind of a base layer game that's in control of the community that's playing it, it's more than just something that you do on Reddit or something that you do in a like board game. It can actually be kind of the way a society runs. And that's really how I think about a lot of the work that's going on in the space. Like, there's a whole bunch of projects out there, a whole bunch of thinking out there that has this ability to become the meta game, this base layer thing that people like to play it because they can shape it. And that potential makes it easier. Like when people are dissatisfied with a game being played, well, if the core game is very responsive to people's feelings about the game, then I think you end up in a less bad place than the places that we can get stuck in right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it makes total sense, right? That if your influence on the game can actually change the game, and let's say that, like, in a good way, right, where you see things happening, where you solve for your own problems, then there's a potential that those problems you solve help other people, and that the other people are experiencing those problems as well. And so it's like, if everybody's optimizing for, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a thought rabbit hole, but if everybody's optimizing for their own set of issues, then perhaps we solve greater issues together by pooling those ideas into one place that can operate as that baseline society in the cyberspace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely possible, and I'm really excited about the different people trying. I like the ideas behind source cred, basically allowing communities to distribute rewards based on the previous contributors saying, hey, I also like this, and having the cred just flow to those contributors. I think that's good potential for a meta game. Circles UBI is a kind of a meta game. It's like, hey, we should have this universal basic income, but how are we going to build it? Well, we're just going to let people say, well, I think this person should have a basic income, and now they do. So then you build it up from there. Like there's so much possibility to build an economic, social, political game that's so much more responsive to the people who participate in it. And I think if we succeed in doing that, the amount of lost value that currently is happening in our society because it's not responsive to the people who live in the society. Like, to me, society right now is very good. Like, there are problems, but I think that what the people who came before us have accomplished is extremely good. But I still think there's a ton of lost value that we're leaving on the table because we have a system that isn't responsive to people. And when we figure out how to crack that nut, we're not going to get a utopia. I don't think a utopia exists. But the amount of value that's just sitting there on the table waiting for us to grab it, I think is very, very large.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great perspective, because there's definitely a lot of research and a lot of rabbit holes to go down when it comes to seeing where value is lost and how value is perceived, and the mechanics for society valuing things. So shifting that and changing that is obviously going to open up a lot of interesting experiments, like I think metagame is. And I think one of the most interesting kind of philosophies of metagame is not to see itself or think of itself as the only game, right? Or as the only place where people should be able to or could be able to do these things. It's a hub where many, many things can plug in, and where many people can bring together ideas and shape the platform and the kind of culture that rises to the top there, that empowers people. And that's what I mean, metagame has never been funded for anything outside of what the community has funded it, right? Through Gitcoin grants or through individual contributors adding money or, doing work essentially. And even in the early stages, it was about, finding a way to distribute people rewards in the system by creating these seeds. But the seeds were never inherently valuable. They didn't have a conversion rate or anything. I remember endless conversations about, well, how much are seeds worth? How many do I get in an hour? It's like TBD, let's build it together. Let's build the value of what that becomes together. You're either in or you're out. If people are like, oh, that doesn't work for me, then that's totally understandable. But man, they've got a great community of people and they're moving in the right direction. It's definitely not as clear or like KPI driven as many, many other things that we might have experienced or been a part of in the past, but it's still moving, and it's moving in a great direction that I think the community is excited about. So it's cool to see. And all the other experiments that are out there are also like cool and good use cases for finding out what works and what things are functioning.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the patterns that I've come across in the examples of thriving civic life that I've tried to find is that a lot of them were actually subsidized by somebody else. In the early 20th century, from what I've read, it sounds like a lot of employers paid the dues for their employees' membership in civic associations. And then the other example that I like to refer to is college campuses. And in America, on your bill for college, I think most people see the student activity fee, this fee that everybody has to pay. And maybe not everybody uses it. It's not charged based on how much you use. It's just charged based saying, hey, everybody has to pay this, and we're going to use this to fund some activities, and you better participate in the activities.
It's like saying, hey, we're putting these things together and you're here and we want you to be involved. You're going to pay for it just because like you're a part of this like micro society on a college campus or whatever. And so, yeah, do take advantage of it because you're paying for it. It's kind of a forced tax, right?
Exactly that. And I think that can complement the kind of pattern that you mentioned in Metagame, where people are basically donating to support the work that's happening. Don't know how much seeds are worth yet, but if you can get people to pay for seeds and find somebody else to say, hey, I'm going to match what people pay for seeds, and just try to basically amplify whatever's going on in the metagame ecosystem, as long as somebody's sending some sort of signal that what's happening is valuable by spending some money from seeds, you could probably get other people to say, I'm going to match whatever's happening there. And if you can start that, to me, the subsidies are this ability to create just a bigger, like, to show people the possibility that's there with less, like, it's hard to build up a flow of funds from scratch. But if you can build up a small flow of funds, have somebody subsidize that flow of funds, you can show people what the community would actually be capable of if we could get enough people to contribute without the subsidies. And then once people see the possibility, you don't really need the subsidies as much. So then people can kind of contribute on their own once they know what's possible. But right now, a lot of people don't really know what they're capable of. People don't know what we can do when we gather together in these communities that start funding our own work. If we can find a way to subsidize that sort of thing, whether it's the metagame or source credit or whatever, I think people will see what's possible and be willing to sustain it even when the subsidies aren't there anymore.
Wow. Yeah, that is a really awesome kind of vision, of kickstarting the process essentially through the subsidies. I would be interested in like exploring that more. Does this tie back to Panvala, like the way that you guys see subsidizing communities through your work?
Absolutely. So the way Panvala fits in the vision in my head of this like thriving civic life in cyberspace is that there's this league that's trying to help as many communities as possible earn subsidies for their work. And Panvala is this league. It's a league that's governed by its owners, the people who hold these tokens. And what we do is we work together to get subsidies. The main subsidy that we run on right now is inflation subsidies. So we just took Bitcoin's model, which uses inflation subsidies to fund security, and we're just doing the same thing for subsidizing communities. That's already working. It's matching at about 12x for the last round of Bitcoin grants. We can help communities subsidize the work that they do by operating within this league and getting people to cooperate to earn those subsidies. That to me is the key. I'm biased. I think it's kind of the thing that can unlock a lot of the potential for civic life in cyberspace. I think a lot of the ideas have been around, and when we talk about the different DAOs that we can create, the different ways we can have communities allocate their own incentives, those are all great, and they probably already work. We just don't know that they work because we haven't been able to subsidize them yet, so people could see what the possibilities are. And what I hope we can do with Panvala is to start to subsidize those different projects that are happening that are probably already great models for how communities can allocate their own rewards and get people to see what's happening there. Subsidies to me are the missing piece, and I hope we can start to show people that soon.
That is really, it just made me think about another thing. It feels like a missing piece is not properly or eloquently sharing the benefits of civic life and what that does for employees. And we can go like Ethereum employees, right? Maker, Gnosis, EF, and then we can go even beyond that. Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, like what would the benefit be to the employees of these companies or these organizations? And then what would the pass on benefit be to those organizations themselves? And I can already see a bunch of potential life-changing, opportunities for people to connect and collaborate and work outside of the office on things, or like working on things that they really care about and projects they really think can make an impact and change the world in a sense.
Absolutely. And what's really exciting is that Gnosis already kind of started doing this organically. For the last round of Gitcoin grants, I believe they gave all their employees 100 DAI or something. They gave them some money to donate on Gitcoin grants. So I think that's great. It's a great example of a company being responsible for the public goods in the ecosystem that they work within. But what you're saying would basically amplify that. So not only are you giving money to make sure that the critical infrastructure gets funded, but also if you deploy it not just individually, but through the civic associations that you're a part of, then you're also building vital social relationships with people who your company can actually leverage in the future to be able to achieve its goals. Like, we are on top of this gold mine of social wealth in our community that we're missing out on because we're not organized. But we're going to be organized. We just have to coordinate those subsidies from companies like Gnosis, from inflation subsidies, maybe from companies that we all collectively patronize, like Amazon Web Services or whoever. If we can coordinate these subsidies and use it to amplify civic life, both in the Ethereum community and broaden out from there, I think we're going to see something really special.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a great perspective and a great goal to strive towards. Do you see yourself or do you see Panvala branching out of Ethereum as well and reaching out into actual Fortune 500 companies to offer these opportunities as well? Is that on the roadmap or the plan for you guys?
Absolutely. Panvala is for everybody. We're starting within the Ethereum ecosystem, but the vision of what we're trying to do is we're trying to grow civic life in cyberspace. We want the whole internet to have a thriving civic life. And to do that, we have to start somewhere. It makes sense to start in the Ethereum ecosystem, but there's no reason for us to stop there. We should keep going. And I think it's not only going to make the internet a better place, I think it's going to make the real world a better place. Because right now we're so dependent on corporations and governments that people are kind of frustrated with the outcomes we get because we don't really control them. Our governments are monopolies. If you're not on the winning side of a political battle, then you don't get what you want. And maybe your government's so bad that even the winners don't really get what they want. It's kind of a frustrating place to be in. But if you can rebuild civic life starting in cyberspace, then I think we're going to provide an outlet for people to solve their problems without having to demand anything from somebody else. In the political realm, it's all about what you demand. It's like, hey, make sure your representative does this. Make sure these wealthy fat cats do this. And in the world of civic life, it's not about demands at all. It's about finding your people, the people who want to cooperate with you, the people who share similar goals, the people who you form social bonds with, and doing your work there, solving the problems to the best of your ability within your community. Maybe you can't solve them all, but we're doing so little work right now within the realm of civic life to solve the problems that face us, that if we can start to rebuild that and get far beyond the Ethereum ecosystem, get to literally everybody, I think that will release some of the tension that's been built up in our society, especially over the last decade or so.
Man, yeah, I can absolutely see it. I see where you're going with it, and yeah, a little bit mind blowing. I love it.
Yeah, I didn't always think that this was possible. At this point, I know that this is possible, and I'm just trying to show it to people. But when I first thought that it might be possible, I kind of spent a week pacing around in my apartment trying to figure out, can this actually be true and what are the implications of that? And I think the implications are truly mind-blowing. It's hard for me to convey them all, but I do think this ability to organize civic life in cyberspace is a phenomenon that will reshape the way we see the world. And I think it'll be for the better. I think it'll be in a way where more people get what they want. I think it'll be in a way where more people are parts of thriving communities. I think it'll be in a way where more people have strong social bonds that they can depend on for the problems that they encounter in the course of anyone's life. I think it'll just be much better. The shape of it is hard to see in particular, but I think the trend that we're on is something that's worth being optimistic about, even though there's so much pessimism out there today.
It sounds like you have like a history of studying and researching these things. Was this something that you were focused on like in college or even before that, or some experience that brought you to this place and that helped you see these problems that now you're working so diligently to solve?
I've always been interested in economics in general, so trying to like read about what's going on in the economy and how the economy works, all that kind of stuff. For me, the deeper dive into like how society could coordinate itself in a better way didn't really start until the Ethereum phase of my life in 2015. But like before Ethereum, I was into Bitcoin. It's like, hey, there's this digital gold thing that's fascinating. But when it clicked for me what Ethereum could do, it's basically this generalized platform for enforcing the rules of something like a board game. So you write up the rules and this decentralized network will enforce it on the internet for you. You don't need to depend on anybody to do it. The rules themselves are just going to be enforced however you wrote them, even if there was a bug. So once I understood that, it's like, well, what do you do with that? Like, if you could do literally anything with that, that's kind of the metagame, mind blown kind of moment. You can write rules that people find so enjoyable, so valuable to adhere to, that they keep doing it without needing anybody to ask them to do it. It's just a voluntary system that people opt into, and they keep doing it because it's just great. And we don't really have anything like that today. We don't have like the base layer stuff of our economy and of our society is based on force. It's based on just saying,
it's
hey,
a monopoly of force, right?
It's a monopoly of force, and it's very powerful. Like, not to ding the people who came before us. This stuff is fascinating. It's real good. Like whoever built the institutions that we're currently like living on top of right now, A+ work there. But the idea that we could do even better than that, not that we don't need force, like I don't think that we're going to completely eliminate that, but imagine that we could dramatically expand what we could coordinate on without any force at all. If we could dramatically expand it. Maybe there's a tiny little area where we're like, that's there's stuff that needs to be done that we still have to force people to do, so we still have that.
It's the idea that you could actually like incentivize people enough to do things that were not only good for society but good for themselves.
Absolutely.
And we could eliminate all of the crazy expenses that come with having a huge network of force to keep all those rules in place.
We could eliminate the expenses, but we could also eliminate the non-financial costs of having that. As people are hopefully well aware with at this point, like force is not always used well by our governments. Our governments are really bad at it sometimes, not just in their application of the use of force, but when we have to use force, then we have to agree on how to use it. So we have to get everybody together. We have to get 51% of the people to agree on something, and then 49% of the people are going to lose. I think when you don't rely on force for more of the problems that we need to solve, then we don't get into problems. We don't get solutions where 49% of the people lose. We get more and more solutions where as many people as possible win. We can do so much better for so many of the problems that we face that I think a lot of people are going to be pleasantly surprised when they see the world 10 years from now.
Yeah. It was interesting. It reminds me of, I was watching the show, The Last Tsars, about the last autocratic family in Russia. And it's like, there's stages of like ruling or like setting up countries or societies, and we're evolving through the stages. And it's like things kind of had to be how they were in the beginning, right? To rally up enough people to form armies or countries and claim territory. But things are so different now. And we kind of have these like hard set borders or barriers between people. It's like what's keeping the US and Mexico from actually like being more of a collaborative nation, right? And sharing resources and crossing over. And like we're going totally the wrong, I mean, in my opinion, we're going totally the wrong direction by trying to like silo ourselves off from the resources and the human capital that exists outside of this country or any country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a much bigger conversation.
No, like I think you're definitely right. Like if we can coordinate in more voluntary ways, then it's not necessarily that borders will go away, but maybe they don't matter as much. If my civic association on the internet, it has people from Mexico, it has people from the UK, it has people from Nigeria, it has all these people working together to solve the same problems, then maybe it doesn't matter so much that we live in different countries. And in fact, if we're working together to find subsidies for the work that we're trying to do together, then maybe instead of right now, governments care a lot about what happens within their borders because that's where their subsidies come from, except they're not subsidies, they're taxes. But if we're working together to find subsidies where borders don't matter, then maybe a lot of the disputes that happen because governments are trying to get as much stuff happening on their turf, if the turf doesn't matter anymore, then maybe a lot of the conflicts that we've run into, a lot of the places where we have to draw clear lines to say these people benefit and these people don't, maybe we don't have to exclude people as much anymore. Like a lot of our current systems depend on excluding people because they wouldn't work otherwise. I'm not saying you can just dissolve the borders, let everybody in and things will be happy. Like I don't think that actually works. But if we have systems that aren't dependent on the same drive that produces cooperation, if we can create a new drive, then I think we can avoid a lot of the downsides of those cross-border relationships.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Well, we're coming towards the end here. I would love to just, I like to give people a chance to share like an interesting experience or story that's happened to you or that you've been involved with while working inside of Ethereum.
Oh, interesting. Story since I've been working in Ethereum. So off the top of my head, I'd probably start with just when I started working at Consensus. So this was 2015. I had been trying to find a way to make Ethereum my day job, found Consensus, started working in 2015. And then a couple weeks later is DevCon 1. So I find myself in London for DevCon 1. At that point, I had never been to Europe before, but basically saying, oh, I'm going to do Ethereum stuff now kind of made my life instantly global, which was a very strange feeling at the time. But basically, I go to London, I'm staying in this hostel, and there's 6 other guys in the room that I'm staying in. We're all trying to save as much money as possible. It was very hard to get paid doing Ethereum work. So nobody was getting giant paychecks at that point. The ICO boom hadn't happened at all. Ether itself hadn't happened at all. It was not, nobody was rich. So going there, seeing a room full of people, listening to the same talks, working on the same kind of stuff, you got this instant sense that something was actually working here, that this wasn't all like pipe dreams. It felt like tangible progress had actually been made since I'd started paying attention. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is a real thing. And to look back on that from this vantage point, think of the same 6 people who are sharing a hostel with me and think that, hey, there's no way that those same people are staying in hostels at this point because so much value has been created in this ecosystem that even when a lot of the public sees the blockchain world, they think of all these get-rich-quick schemes, people who happen to hold the right token at the right time and got really wealthy. And what I'm really excited about is to start to change the story to where it's not about people individually having their private wealth being dramatically amplified because of this technology. I think we're at a point where we're about to see people's social wealth be dramatically amplified by this technology. And to have that same transition, like think of where in our society that hostel, the equivalent of that hostel is. Maybe there's things that we all know that we want. There's a lot of us probably want a better environment outside our doors. We probably want better schools. We want better research being done to solve new problems. Like there's so many parts of our society where in terms of our social wealth, we're staying in that hostel. And if we find ways to dramatically amplify our social wealth using this technology, I think this is going to be a story that really benefits a lot more people. So I'm super excited about it.
Sounds like your Ethereum awakening moment.
It really is.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for sharing the story. I hope other people can relate to it. And I really appreciate your time, Niran.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Where can people find more information about you or things you'd like them to look into?
The best place to go to learn more about Panvala is panvala.com. We're building a league of communities that work together to earn subsidies for their work, both from corporations and from inflation subsidies from our currency, panvala.com. Secondly, if you're listening to this in time, from June 1st to June 6th is DAO Rush Week, which is an event that I'm helping organize with MetaCartel. We want people to build stronger communities, and we want to show people what communities currently exist that they can join in the space that are powered by this new technology. So if you are at all interested in DAOs, the real time to pay attention is this coming week, June 1st to 6th. If you go to DAORushweek.com, you'll see over 20 events that are being hosted by these DAOs themselves. You can go listen to them talk about their mission, meet their members, and hopefully by the end of the week, you'll find a DAO that you want to join.
Perfect. Thank you. So much good stuff, Niran, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Likewise. Great talking to you.
You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind. You believe it's morning.